All right, what's going on? How are you? I don't even know if I should even ask how are y'all doing today. Obviously, if you're an Atlanta Falcons fan, you're probably not in the best of moods. You're going to have to deal with quite a bit of ridicule, a lot of crow you're going to have to eat, and quite frankly, it's probably going to be a tough weekend. So yesterday, we did not show up at all. So it's very sad, but the Falcons did not even attempt. I can't say they didn't attempt. There were things that did show up that you say, okay, maybe. But when you get beat 25-0 at your house, I've heard every excuse. I've heard we didn't have everyone there, which is true. I've heard, the offensive line was garbage, which is true. I heard the defense is young, which is true. But 25-0 followed up 43-3, leaves us at a position where you truly during these next 10 days where the Falcons as an organization have to sit down and kind of do some self-reflecting on what is exactly going on in this franchise. And quite frankly, I don't think they're going to find the answer in 10 days. But I started thinking about something. And I started thinking, and I didn't want this to be this long, drawn-out video because we can go by every era, by every mistake they made, every protection that wasn't done, every coverage that was blown, and you can go up and down the line, and we can pick apart this Atlanta team, this Atlanta franchise, and figure out things that have gone wrong. Everyone's going to have an opinion, and on a day like today, this is the day to hear them. It's a good day to sit back and say what is going on with this franchise. But I wanted to go in another direction. I really did. On my right, you'll see Thanos. And those of you who are not familiar with Thanos, Thanos was the all-time bad guy in the Marvel movies, the last MCU phase 3 that was going on. And he was the being who collected all of the Infinity Stones and had them in a gauntlet where he basically snapped his fingers and everything went away and all of that good stuff. Well, in the second movie, the Endgame movie, the Avengers found a way to go back in time, retrieve the stones, and were able to basically change the timeline coming forward. In other words, we're able to kind of change history. So my question to you, and it's simple, and it's not really, that difficult. If you had the gauntlet, where would you course correct the woeful history of the Falcons franchise? And for those of you who need to break it down, what moment would you go back to in our franchise history and say, if we went right back there, we would have either much more success or a better time at it as fans with our franchise. There are many places you can go. I know a lot of you would go back to February 2017, understandably. A lot of you would go back further and say the draft of 2008, which I don't necessarily agree with, but not here or there. Some of you would go back as far as this year's draft. Or maybe you even go back further when Arthur Blank took ownership of the Atlanta Falcons, for those of you who think he's the cause for all of this. So as I'm leaving this post up, I'm going to say a couple of things, but I want to hear what everyone thinks about where would you go back in this franchise? If you could go get the little things that Tony Stark made and you were able to get the stones and go back in time to that place, where would you go back to that would course correct the Atlanta Falcons to be a different franchise at this moment? Again, all the things that happened yesterday and the day before, and it's the offensive line and blah, blah, and yeah, all that aside. But as a fan, where would you go back to say, let me go back to this moment and change this, and it would eventually change some things going forward. Micho, what's going on, man? How you doing? Say we should have gotten something last night. Well, hey, we got nothing. Andrietta, how you doing, ma'am? Improvement was the only goal with the team, and I think a lot of people are getting to that. We want to take everyone at face value, ma'am, and that's one of the things we wanted. When we heard Terry Fontenot earlier this year say, we're not rebuilding, we're trying to win now. Well, what did you think he was going to say? I mean, a GM is not going to come out and tell you, I'm trying to fail, or hold off on your season ticket money this year because we're not going to be good for 2 years. He's going to tell you what you want to hear, and you want to hear that your franchise is trying to win. So you're absolutely right. Yeah, the only goal was improving with this team, and there are some positives, believe it or not, in a 25-0 loss. You got to see a sprinkling of Allison yesterday. You got to see AJ finally get an interception. The defense, for what it's worth, folks, held them to 13 points going into the fourth quarter. Now, I don't know how much credence this game was very similar to the Carolina game that we played, with the exception we scored against Carolina, where the defense did their part as far as, containing the bleeding, stopping the immediate bleeding, but the offense didn't come through. So it's ugly. Calvin, yeah, I feel you. Absolutely. Just ugly, ugly, ugly. Gregory says Thanos was actually the good guy. In his mind, he was. It depends on what your perspective is, Gregory. I get where you're going if you're a comic book guy and actually go back to what he was trying to accomplish from that. But he was a villain, bro. And for the purpose of this exercise, he's a villain. So you can keep him as that in your land, but for what I'm asking, he's going to be the villain. How about that? Eddie Thompson says easy. I want to hear what you're going to say. Say not trading for Jeff George, tanking and getting Peyton Manning, and that Jeff George pick would have been Marvin Harrison. That's actually not a bad choice there, Eddie, because when you think about it, yeah, Jeff George was brought in here as a patchwork. I don't think he was ever brought in here to be looked at as a long-term solution to the Falcons. So you're absolutely right. Had we just let things be, and if I'm not mistaken, Ed, remind me, I think, was that the Billy Joe Tolliver Was Billy Joe Tolliver the quarterback? I know Bobby Hebert was on that team because he led us to a couple of wins after that. But yeah, that very good point. That's actually what I'm looking for. Where would you go back? That's a very good spot to go in. What's going on, brother? Say I would not fire Dan Reeves. We had just handed Green Bay their first home playoff loss, then followed that up by hiring a child in Jim Mora Jr. I think Dan Reeves, unfortunately, which is kind of interesting that you say that. I always thought that was kind of a surprise to me that they got rid of him. Maybe there was something philosophically going on there between him and at that time, was that Rich McKay? Then I'm not sure. Was Rich McKay the GM at that point? I could be wrong. I think he was. That's the only reason I think there had to be something behind the scenes, because you also think about that. The year they fired Dan Reeves, coming off the year you're talking about, Mike Vick was hurt 7 or 8 weeks. So it was kind of hard to, Mike Vick just lit up the league, won in Green Bay, and then all of a sudden you got to turn around and deal without him. And yeah, I didn't like that either. That was not good. Eddie says, also never getting Chris Chandler during the tanking for Peyton Manning. That's cool. Octavius says, fire Rich McKay. Okay. What's up, Unc? What's going on? That's Ease. How you feeling, brother? Gregory also says, I would have walked Dimitroff out after Mike Smith was fired. For all it's worth, folks, I like Mike Smith. And I don't know, maybe that was just me. I like Mike Smith. I think I don't know whether Mike Smith was behind bringing in Steven Jackson at that time. Maybe that was his decision. Maybe that was his demise. I don't know. But I would have made a different decision there. What's going on, Herb? How you doing, my friend? Said, would go back and slap the hell out of Vic about dog fighting. I'm surprised nobody went to that moment to say, let me go back to one of those backyard meetings where Mike Vick was and stop him from involving himself in dog fighting. That's actually a really good point, because if you go back and catch that, or I even say this, Herb, go back and tell Mike to tell the truth before the 2007 season, tell the truth about what happened, and maybe, just maybe, things could be a little different. That's actually really good. That's actually good. Let me go down here, and I apologize. Nick, what's going on, buddy? How you doing, man? Said this is a distressing loss, bro. Not only distressing, Nick, this was I've been watching this team for a long time, and even 3-win teams, 4-win teams, yeah, maybe it's because of the social media angle that we're able to see and hear from everybody a lot more than we were back in the 70s and 80s when we were going through a lot of those struggles. But yeah, this is in the social media era, this is probably as low as you can get. And yeah, I'm not even dismissing the 4 wins you got against the teams you did to win a football game in the NFL. I don't care who it is. It takes a lot. But this 2-game stretch, as a fan, you've got to understand Arthur Blank, Rich McKay, Matt Ryan, Arthur Smith, Terry Fontenot. You got to understand this is unacceptable. And as those of you who spend your hard-earned money, spend your emotional investment into this Atlanta Falcon team, what we saw on that field yesterday, and thank God I was at work, I was listening, so I wasn't able to visualize it until I got home yesterday. But what they put this fan base through, folks, that's unacceptable. You don't do that. That's ridiculous. I think that's horrible. My brother Abel says, let me change it. Abel says, keep Favre and fire Glanville. Hire Shanahan instead of Quinn. That's actually that actually would be a good point. You know, the only thing that was so hard in that particular time, buddy, was because Brett was not exactly the greatest character at that time. It was kind of hard to extrapolate how he would be. But you're right. With the Gauntlet, you can go back and say, hold on before y'all trade him. Hold up. I could go back and say, let's keep Favre. You're absolutely, that's what I'm talking about. This is what this exercise is. What you gonna do with the Gauntlet? E says, if I had the Gauntlet, that time stone would be used heavy. we would have 30 chips. Okay, you okay? Let me change the rules. You can only go back once. That's a good thought, though. You can only go back. You can only go back one time. And it says A Bear, yeah, I thought that's what it was, because I know A Bear came in and actually won the game that clinched us to go to the playoffs that one year. That sounded like a lot of people didn't really care for Mr. Jeff George. What's going on, Glenn? How you doing, sir? Can we say rebuild? Yeah, I think now people are understanding where we were going with that. Nicholas says Arthur Blank was a new owner and wanted to get his own guy. He was a carryover from the previous regime. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Sean, how you doing, Sean? Sean says, have the Dolphins grab Breeze instead of him going to New Orleans. Outside of those ain'ts, teams, the division was ours to lose if we stay consistent. Man, Sean, that's a good point. And that's thinking outside the box. Remember, Miami was just about to go, they were about to go all in until Breeze hurt his shoulder. And had Miami signed Breeze, Brady would have been fighting with Drew Brees all this time. And the NFC South, to his point, could have been ours. That's the kind of thinking I'm talking about right there. Thank you, brother. That's really good. Eddie says McKay came after the return game versus the Panthers. Reeves got fired after the Panthers game. I appreciate that. And because my memory lane sometimes is a little back when I think about that stuff. Eddie also says not trading 5 picks for Julio and drafting Cam Jordan and Sherman with those picks. Very good. We gave up a bundle to get Julio, and as we see now, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. Yes, he's going to be an Atlanta legend. But when you think about it and you go back to that point, he's absolutely right. You could have used a lot of those picks to help build the infrastructure of this team, get a real a bona fide defensive end and a legitimate corner. Remember, Sherman was not even was Sherman what, 6th round, 5th round? Sherman wasn't even a high draft pick. So, Brother Tidy, how you doing, my friend? Said Mike Smith was cool with you, Steve, and Dimitroff was cool with me. I've never understood the Dimitroff slander. The man had us in the playoffs his first year as the GM and took 2 different teams with 2 different coaching staffs to the NFC championship. Let me get this. It's not his fault that our coaches and players couldn't close the most winnable championship game in history. Sorry about the no. Dude, I write long replies myself. It's all good, but sometimes you have to get your point, and you made a very good point. I know it's easy for TD to be the sacrificial lamb for the history of Atlanta Falcons for the last few years. I understand it. They left us in a horrible place too financially. I keep that in mind. I'm sure some of those decisions, when we start talking about the money we paid Matt the second time, the money we paid Julio after the summer of discontent that we gave him the extra $2 million the year before, those things might have been more Blank driven than they were Dimitroff driven. I'm not saying Dimitroff shouldn't be accountable for a lot of the things that are going on, but I am saying that from a standpoint of Dimitrov literally changed the culture of this franchise. Folks don't want to hear that, but it's true. Go back to the pre-Dimitrov era when we didn't have back-to-back winning seasons, when we didn't have back-to-back-to-back playoff runs, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Now, of course, in 2021, while we're sitting here being outscored, whatever it is, 60-something to 3, you're not thinking about that. But he's absolutely right. There is definitely a lot. There's a lot there when you start talking about what Dimitrov was and what he was with us. Octavius says we should have picked T.J. Watt instead of Tat McKinley in the 2017 draft. This is true. I would go back to a more meaningful moment. In my opinion, that's one small moment. I'm saying a moment that you can go back to, and if it's T.J. Watt for you, that's fine, because T.J. would have changed this defense significantly. So I'm not poo-pooing your thing, but I'm more meaning something that will absolutely turn this franchise around, like Eddie was talking about he had two very good examples, the Jeff George example and the Julio Jones with the draft picks. When you start thinking about those are course-correcting moments in franchise history that would have started. But you're in a good vein, so I'm not dogging you. Ricky was going on. Ricky said, "What happened last night, man? I'm trying to forget about it. I'm glad I didn't have to see it until last night when I was able to rewind and say what the mess is going on with this team. We can't get a 3rd and 1 and a 4th and 1 at a critical time in the game. Just absolutely ridiculous. I was embarrassed just like you, Rick. So I understand, man. I understand where you're coming from. Mark Ariel, how you doing, my friend? I'm hurting now. How do we fix this after this season? That's the key. I think if anything, I was listening to my brother Marcus last night after the game, and I know folks don't want to hear this, and I know emotionally a lot of folks are going to disagree, but yesterday might have been that line in the sand where we start giving Matt his flowers for the past years and just understanding that none of that was a scratch. Matt had 25% to do with what happened yesterday. That offensive line was absolutely garbage. Our receivers could not get open. The defense could not stop the running game. Koo missed another field goal, but I'm still not ready to mess with him because he hit the field goal and somebody had a pre-snap penalty. So as much as I know folks want this to turn into Matt Ryan is trash, it's time for him to go. I'm not going to that narrative. But it is time to go. There needs to be a different synergy in the franchise. And we keep changing parts, but we keeping the one part in there. And I think what's happening is if we're going to lose famously like this, if we're going to take lumps like this, I would at least want the lumps to be with an up-and-coming quarterback who I know is taking those bullets now so next year he can be stronger. The more we keep stunning this franchise by keeping Matt around, and I understand what's going on financially, I get it. But if I had the gauntlet, one of the places I would go to is April 2021. And I don't mind losing, y'all. People lose. Everybody doesn't win every time. I don't mind the losing. But it's how we getting beat. We are famously, embarrassingly getting humiliated as a fan base, as a franchise, as a city. Thank God for the Braves. That humiliation that was on TV yesterday, I mean, there are no words. It's just horrific. Just that was just some really bad stuff, y'all. Horrible. I'm just so embarrassed. So embarrassed. Monica, how you doing? Good to see you come in here. I saw you yesterday posting. I mean, I don't even know. What do you think, Monica? How do you what would be your moment that you would go back in the history now, not so much this year. There's nothing we can do about 2021. But where would you go back and say, if this didn't happen, if I go back and change this, the rest of this franchise would be good. That's what I'm looking for. Rusty, what's going on? I know you had your moment there. So the stadium had a lot more fans, and I thought there were a lot of Patriots fans. So that might explain why. What a terrible performance when Rosen and Franks came in and threw those 2 interceptions. The Patriot fans made the being sound like a Pat's home game shameful. And look, we are at a bad point right now in this franchise. And it's going to be hard to get goodwill towards the Atlanta fan base when you're not putting on a good product on the field. I'm sorry. It's going to be hard to make people come out on a Thursday night knowing they got to get up Friday morning if you're putting up the performance we had against Dallas and then turn around and do this. And thank God it's a away game next week at Jacksonville, because you wouldn't get anybody to come next week. It's a line drawn in the sand moment right now for the Atlanta franchise. I really, and I'm so sorry. I see everybody. Levon, I see you. Thomas, I see you. Mike, I see you. Speechless. Listen, Odolph, I see you, brother. I see all y'all coming in. Continue to put the comments down. I just want to leave this in here and I'm going to post the thing one more time just to tell everybody, if you had the gauntlet, where would you course correct the history of this franchise? Unfortunately, I got on a little late, so I got to get ready to go to work. But folks, we got a long way to go. This franchise they're going to have to do a lot of soul searching in 10 days to get this team back where we want to. I understand injuries play a part. I understand injuries happen and things like that, but that was not a very good performance. And I lean heavily on the offense, because say what you want to say about the defense. If I'm holding the opponents to 13 points before the fourth quarter in most NFL games, I'm either winning or I'm in the game. We were so inept yesterday that our defense is going back to the sideline saying, man, what's up with that? But the Matt Ryan thing, maybe we'll go back to it on Sunday. It's not a variant of Matt Ryan. It's not a matter of fact. If anything, I wish some miraculous way he would be able to go to another franchise and flourish. But for right now, we need different synergy. Has nothing to do with Matt not being efficient, not being whatever, but it's kind of clear to me and kind of clear to everyone else who's in this, who takes this stuff in, that there's got to be a different energy going on. And right now, Matt can make all the Tide commercials with Stone Cold and Ice-T all he wants to. He can have all the FaceTime he wants to. But that's not going to change base feels about him going forward. Hey, until then, I'll catch y'all on Sunday. Even though we don't have a game, I'll pop in. Thank y'all for joining me. Please keep continuing to comment on there for me. Where would you course correct? Where would you go back and change the history? Until then, take care, y'all. Y'all have a